For the land of the free.
The shooting of Stephon Clark in Sacramento this spring is no longer even the latest in a seemingly never-ending string of police killings and abuses across the nation. While there is growing grassroots momentum for serious change to the rules for the use of guns by police, there is also deep political and institutional resistance to meaningful restrictions on police powers. The most urgent issue in police reform is to save lives by stopping police from shooting people. While laws and standards vary from state to state, and even within states, the common element is the obscene fraud that a cop may shoot to kill or use reasonable force if he fears for his life. Over the years, we've seen case after case of cops killing unarmed people, including children in their own homes. We hear cop excuses like, he put his hand in his pocket, he went for his waistband, he reached in the glove compartment after I asked to see his papers, and I feared for my life. Fear is a subjective mental state. What is not fear-inducing to a normal person might very well be fear-inducing to a cop trained to be fearful, paranoid, and panicky.
Put the camera down out of my face, because I don't know what it... There's guns...
It's a camera.
There's cameras that are guns. There's cameras that are guns if you look it up.
And put your phone in the pocket.
Boy, I gotta put my phone in the pocket. I ain't doing nothing.
You're under investigation right now.
Investigation of what? I was walking.
But you know, that's not what I saw.
Show me your hands! Gun! Fire 7 shots fired, subject down.
Just 2 days after the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, 20-year-old Dylan Taylor met a similar fate in Salt Lake City, Utah. However, the district attorney in Salt Lake City ruled that Taylor's shooting was justified not because Taylor posed an actual threat, but because the cop reasonably perceived a threat. But how reasonable are those perceptions really? If the perceived threat were real, does that justify the immediate execution of the suspect?
Get him out!
I saw him reaching. He's reaching.
Fear and perceived threats go together. What seems reasonable to a scared or raging bull cop might not be reasonable to a normal person.
I saw him reaching.
Even when a cop thinks he actually sees a gun in someone's hand, sometimes it turns out to be just a cell phone, a video game controller, or a toy. But then it's too late. So clearly, we cannot let cops kill on the basis of their perceptions, on the basis of what they think they see and what they think is reasonable or necessary to stop what they think is an imminent threat that scares the crap out of them. And what of all the cases of cops responding to calls for help for a mentally ill person with a knife, fork, spatula, tire iron, screwdriver, or other such weapon? The last thing the cop should do is draw his gun. But typically, when the cops arrive, they take a few seconds to try to get a suspect to drop the perceived weapon. Then they just run out of patience, or the suspect shifts his feet, or makes some other minor movement, and bang.
Drop that for me. Drop that for me, guy.
Jay!
Drop it.
Jay!
Drop it.
Jay!
Newly public footage shows how police gunned down a mentally ill man. A Department of Justice...
There are other methods, tools, and tactics to effectively and safely deal with such persons. These are used effectively in other countries. American cops are trained to shoot to kill, and only to kill, never to wound. Why is that?
What's the thought of killing a man? You don't always have to. If he's on foot, a bullet in the shoulder will knock him down and you can disarm him.
I did just as you told me to. I shot him in the shoulder, then disarmed him.
You're learning.
Your gun to kill bad men.
I'm not going to do any killing.
You will not defend yourself?
Oh, I'll shoot if I have to. But I'll shoot to wound, not to kill. A man must die. It's up to the law to decide that. Not the person behind a six-shooter.
Some police departments in Europe and other places allow their officers to shoot to wound when appropriate. If the goal is to neutralize a threat to the public or the officer, shooting to wound can often do that. Since shooting to wound is a standard tactic in many other countries, why is it not used here? I'm sure you know that police in some departments in Europe and elsewhere, Ireland, Norway, and New Zealand for examples, don't even carry guns generally. Over 80% of police in Britain say they don't even want them. They manage to function effectively and safely enough without them. And then there are the lies. Cops and district attorneys lie so much, even in court, even under oath, that there's a word for it. Test-lying. Audio and video recordings show that cops lie about what happens. They plant evidence, they withhold evidence, they spin things to justify their actions.
Hey, man! Hey! My mom was 84 years old!
What happened, and why did she get sprayed?
She got sprayed. She wasn't complying. I was trying to pat her down, and she would not turn around to comply.
Right.
I think we can spin it.
I'm with the understanding.
I'm on.
And the Law Enforcement Officer's Bill of Rights gives them 10 days to work on their stories with each other before they can even be interrogated in an investigation. And now that recording devices are so common, cops have learned to play to the cameras, providing their own narrative to the action. With the suspect on the ground, you can hear them say, "Stop resisting," between clubbings or punches to the suspect. Or you can hear them yell, "Stop reaching for my gun! Stop reaching for my gun!"
As soon as they opened the door, one of the officers reached in and just punched me in my face. As he's trying to take the seatbelt off, he's elbowing me in my jaw. And he's like, "Stop trying to take my gun. Don't take my gun! Stop resisting arrest. Stop trying to take my gun. Take my gun! Get down! Stop resisting! Stop resisting! Why are you trying to take my gun? Get off my gun!"
And they hope the video won't contradict them.
Quite a turnabout. All of the criminal charges against Marcus Jeter have been dismissed. 2 Bloomfield cops have now been indicted. A third quietly pleaded guilty to tampering and retired. It's all because of video the cops may have tried to hide.
In California, it is rare for cops to be charged after a shooting, and even more rare for them to be convicted. California's current standard for the use of guns, the doctrine of reasonable fear, justifies the use of reasonable force. If prosecutors believed that officers had a reason to fear for their safety, then by current standards, they were justified, reasonable in shooting. Whatever the current specifics, we need objective, situation-based criteria for police shootings. When I first proposed this on social media, I was criticized for supposedly proposing a checklist cops would have to go through before firing a gun. I wasn't, but maybe that's a good idea. Here's a description of U.S. military rules for kill shots that one war veteran posted online. Unless they were fired on, they had to go through a series of warning actions, including shots to the side and disabling shots, shooting to wound. If the threat persisted, only then could they shoot to kill. Cop advocates say a checklist won't work because cops have to make split-second decisions. From what I've seen, it's more like cops mostly rush into situations and rush to shoot first and think after. So perhaps a checklist would slow them down enough to keep them from killing unarmed people. So where are we? We can't permit cops to shoot because they're afraid. We can't permit them to shoot on the basis of what they think they see because they've been wrong too many times. The only way to positively know that someone has a gun and not a toy or a tool is if he shoots the gun. So what it comes down to is this. If no one is being shot at, the police cannot shoot first. Yes, exceptions to this rule will be clawed out by police advocates and judges. But this must be the standard, the rule to which exceptions are made. This standard will also force law enforcement departments to look for other tools and tactics to deal with people not armed with firearms. At a news conference in California promoting a police reform bill, supporters of the Assembly bill pointed to a 2016 study that found that officers working under more restrictive kill policies are less likely to kill, and, more importantly to the cops, the cops, are less likely to be killed or assaulted. So the new standard I propose would be a win-win for, well, most of us. Wouldn't it?